Hello, I'm Darcy Downing, and I'm 28 years old. I have episodic ataxia. I was having these dizzy spells. And as time went on, the dizziness, the vertigo started to become so severe that I started to become nauseated and vomiting, associated with the dizzy spells. I have a diagnosis of episodic ataxia type 2, which is prolonged episodes of poor coordination and balance, nausea and vomiting, as well as extreme debilitating vertigo, dizziness, nystagmus, which are involuntary jerky eye movements, tremors, among other symptoms. Anyways, what it does is it causes me to get really sick and have extreme debilitating vertigo. It makes me feel like I am really spinning, and I get very nauseated, and I feel like I have to throw up. And it makes me really sick. It makes me feel totally uncoordinated and unbalanced during an episode. The episodes seem to range mild, moderate to severe, to looking like I do not have ataxia at all, and that I function normally in periods between episodes. But with episodic ataxia type 2, it's often associated with some sort of progressive ataxia, where in between having your episodes, you look okay, but you tend to have, let's say, mild symptoms. For instance, if a person has an episode of their ataxia, it kind of like brings out the symptoms a lot more. But once the episode has passed, the person does not return to a totally normal baseline. They continue to have, let's say, mild balance issues, which can be sort of like a progressive. It's kind of hard to understand, and it's very complex, but if you research this about episodic ataxia type 2, it's associated with a permanent and progressive cerebellar ataxia, and causes your cerebellum, which is in the back of your brain, to degenerate and shrink. And that's where whoever suffers from episodic ataxia type 2, that's where they get these permanent effects from, is the shrinkage of the cerebellum that gradually degenerates over time. That's what that is. I was about 9 years old when I had my very first episode. Okay, I was in elementary school. At the time, the episodes were not happening as often. But as I got older, by the time at the age of 14, they increased and became more frequent and severe. And I was about 17 when I finally received a diagnosis, but it was only based on my symptoms and having a positive family history of ataxia. And I was 17, and this was in 2009 by the time I received the diagnosis. And I'm still in the process of trying to get an actual confirmed diagnosis through genetics. Let's see. I would say that the episodes impact my life quite a lot. It's very extreme and debilitating. It has literally incapacitated me. I cannot function normally during an episode at all a lot of the time. And sometimes I do require a wheelchair when they happen because I cannot walk. Depending on how severe the episodes get, it just kind of depends because my symptoms fluctuate so much. But it really impacts me. And I was having them a lot prior to diagnosis. And it was interfering with schooling and my day-to-day activities. During an episodic ataxia episode. I went back to the same office that first diagnosed me with episodic ataxia, I was seeing the doctor himself. Before, when I was first diagnosed, I was seeing a lady doctor that was there at the same office, and they wanted to do genetic testing, but I ended up moving away. So I ended up going back recently, and my first appointment was interesting. I was told that there was indeed cerebellar atrophy on my MRI. And I learned that another family member I had the same issue, that many people looked over her cerebellar atrophy on her MRI as well as mine until seeing this doctor. So yeah, I have cerebellar atrophy on my MRI, and I was referred to a geneticist, so we'll just have to see what we find out for episodic ataxia, to find my gene variant for my ataxia for certain. So that will be the next step. But yeah, that's what happened recently. The many years I went with people telling me I was normal and that I looked fine, I would have a neurological exam. Earlier on, it looked like I did not have any symptoms of ataxia. I was just getting dizzy spells. So they would examine me and they would say, well, my exams were normal. But now recently, the neurologist would do an exam. They would see actual abnormalities on the exam. So I do have some persistent or permanent abnormalities on my exams, my neurological exam, without being in an actual episode of my ataxia. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say. That's my story up to date on how I was getting diagnosed, and may soon receive the confirmation of the actual thing that I have. Episodic ataxia is a rare neurological condition. Top photo is showing my MRI with cerebellar atrophy where the red arrow is pointing. The bottom is a random normal MRI. Me in the hospital during an episode in a wheelchair.